Everyone, and welcome to A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. I'm your host, Tomás Garza, and we've got a very special show in store for you today. It's very, very poignant, and it's very deep, as you might imagine, because this is the course that we're going through. This is A Course in Miracles. We're going through a workbook for students. So if you're just joining us and you're not familiar with A Course in Miracles or a workbook, I want to welcome you. And I hope that you continue to catch this live stream today and every day, or if you're catching the replay, to go back and look at past episodes of this show, which has been running for about 2.5 months now. And you can find past episodes on Enlightened World Network's YouTube channel. There's a playlist for every show, in fact, on the network, and you can catch them all, in fact. So this is a great place to go if you're interested in past ideas from the workbook, because what this workbook is it's not really a series of homework assignments like you might have gotten in school. It's not like that. It's a self-study course with 365 lessons. That's just the word that the course uses, is a lesson. It's an idea. That's what it is. It's an idea that one practices and holds in mind and works with during the day, one a day for 365 days. And that's, of course, just one component of A Course in Miracles, which also has a text that talks about some of these ideas in much greater detail. And it has a component that I love called the Manual for Teachers, which is like a Q&A. It really is. It's like a question and answer session. And that is a place where you can get a lot of clarification of terminology. Because if you've been following this at all, you'll know that the course uses some words, some very common words like forgiveness, like atonement, very differently than we use in common parlance. So that is definitely something that's worth checking out. But where we are today is lesson 67 in the workbook. And wherever you are, if you're just starting out, again, welcome. And if you're on a different workbook lesson, welcome. And if you don't own a copy of A Course in Miracles, that's also very wonderful. Welcome again, because this is universal spirituality. All of these principles, all of these ideas that we've been talking about and that we're talking about today, that we'll continue to talk about on the live stream, are relevant to anyone in the world. Why? It's universal spiritual principles. So no matter what your background, no matter what your religious tradition or spiritual tradition, whatever that is, there's something here for you. So I want to welcome you and welcome your comments as well. If you're just joining us, I love to talk for a few minutes about my experience and my ideas about the workbook lesson, in hopes that you'll find something in here that's deeply resonant with you and that it will inspire you to practice. That's my hope, ultimately, is to inspire all of you to practice your spirituality, whatever that looks like, and to continue to practice it, because the world needs us now more than ever. There's never been a time where that wasn't the case in the world. But these days, it's very, very evident, isn't it, that the world needs light workers. The world needs people to meditate. The world needs people to mindfully practice their spirituality and to apply themselves to that. Now more than ever, because there's so much going on. All right. So one of the things that I'm very interested in is the question that I've asked a little bit here on the stream in the past week, and that is, how has your spirituality changed you? I want to pose that general question today, and I would invite you, if you're catching this live, to type this into the comments here, into the comment thread. How are you different today as compared with when you started your spiritual practice? How has it transformed you? How has it changed you? And how has it caused you to become a different person? How has that transformed you? I'm very curious to know, and I've been really interested to learn some of your responses. And thank you all for those who have responded. And if you're catching this on the replay, feel welcome to type this into the comments, because I do check this several times a day. So I will get back to you on this. People have said I feel more free, more forgiving, lighter, happier, yeah, with more energy, limitless, with more to give in the world, to give in my work scenarios, with my family, with relationships, everything. So, yeah, how has your spiritual practice changed you? It's a beautiful thing to ponder, actually, because day to day, sometimes it feels like we don't get anywhere, right? Doesn't it? Because sometimes there's something inside of us that's been culturally instilled and reinforced and emphasized over and over again by the internet world in the 21st century and social media. We tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we, to think that we need to have it all figured out and we need to have, boom, a blinding flash of enlightenment just like that. And for most of us, reality is a different story. We discover that embarking on a spiritual path is a process, and some days it doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere. But we really are, if you think about who you are now versus where you were when you started, whenever that was. Over the course of time, I'm willing to bet that you're a very different person as a result of diligent and persistent practice. This is what this is all about. Today's idea in the workbook for students is no different. So, lesson 67, powerful truth. Love created me like itself. All right. Yeah. Love created me like itself. This is a complete and 100% accurate statement of who you are. Let's do some verbal math here and piece something together that I know that you can feel, because we can all feel it. Love created me like itself. God, being love, created me like himself, herself, if you prefer, itself, themselves, if you prefer, whatever. God created me like himself. Love created me like itself. Same. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful statement of who we really are. And one thing that the workbook asks us to do today is remind ourselves of this all of the time. Love created me like itself. And I can't recommend enough that we bring this idea back to mind today, as often as you can remember it, and just recite this to yourself. Love created me like itself. God is perfect love. Love created me like itself. This means, and I know you're following along, that all of our images of ourself are not accurate. That includes all of the labels that we place on ourselves in the world, such as I'm a podcast host, I'm a live stream host. Okay, well, I eh, I am a father, I'm a husband. You might say something else in your case. You might have a certain career and identify with that. We identify with all kinds of things. We identify with ethnic groups, with nationalities. We live in places like the United States and England and Australia, and we give labels to everything in the world. And our idea of who we think we are is not who we really are. Quite simply, that's quite simply the truth. Love created us like itself. So, what we're doing here is we're practicing this idea, and what's going on is a systematic process of undoing our idea about ourselves and at the same time undoing our ideas of God. Now, maybe you were raised in a tradition that saw God as separate from ourselves. In other words, higher than, better than is the meta message that I think a lot of us got. I certainly got this growing up. I mean, I was fed images of God as a man, first of all, which he's not, nor a woman, nor, non-binary, anything like that. These are all labels that we put on the divine. So I had an image of God being an all-powerful white man, actually, with a beard, who had thunderbolts, lightning bolts, in his hand, and at whim was ready and willing to heap suffering down upon us, poor souls, sinners, roaming around in the muck in the pigsty of the world. Not a very encouraging image for a small child. So maybe you can relate to this. This is how I was raised, with a very different conception of God. And at the same time, the same people would tell me, well, God is love. That's accurate. Yeah, that's accurate. God being a man who's willing to strike us down because we've transgressed him and offended, well, that's not accurate. So if you've ever felt that there's no such thing as sin, beautiful. Yeah, that's the case because God has no ego to be offended. Think about it. God doesn't have a separate sense of self. Perfect love is not capable of division and separation. It only extends itself. God only extends himself, itself, if you prefer. No problem. So, what does this mean? In undoing our definition of ourselves, we're also undoing our definition of who we believe God to be, or what, frankly, we believe God to be. And in lesson 67, the workbook suggests that we say things like holiness created me holy, kindness created me kind, joyfulness created me joyful, love created me loving. Attributes, different attributes of God, maybe than the ones that we grew up with, or that we're routinely force fed in society by a lot of different people from all different backgrounds, most of whom aren't really even aware that they're sending out this message. So the deal here is that we are part of God's definition of himself. Yeah? Love can only extend itself. Therefore, we're a part of this. And if you're following along, not a separate part. There is no separation of any kind. Are we beginning to get how powerful, fundamentally, at our core, we really are? When we wipe away all of our conditioning, just let it go. What's left? It's pretty powerful, limitless, joyful. Yeah, never ending, outside of space and time completely. All right. One way we can sum this up is we are not who we commonly think we are. It's one of the beauties of any form of spirituality that presents absolute truth to you. We're not who we think we are. Who are we? How often do you ask yourself, who am I? Okay. Let lesson 67 help you with this question. This self is there for us to find. And because you're watching this, you are in the process of finding yourself, capital S here. Yeah, and this is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful process. And I'm so glad, so glad that you're on this journey. For me, it's a pleasure, it's an honor to be here with you because we don't walk this alone. Yes, moment to moment, we decide for love by ourselves. It looks like we're making all kinds of decisions by ourselves in the world, but ultimately, we are all together in this. There is no separation, period, of any kind. Despite all of the images, all of the situations that the world appears to throw at us, what we're talking about is the truth, ultimate truth here. Now, yes, we must all pay our bills in the world. We must check our email. Sorry. If you haven't checked it for a while, sorry. Just delete everything. That's cool. Yeah, we have to check our email. We have to eat. We have to sleep. There are things that we do to function in society, in the world. And that's absolutely fine. It's well and good. What we're out to do with spiritual practice is experience the truth of who we really are when you wipe all of that conditioning away. That's why there are practices like meditation. That's why there is prayer. That's why people practice whatever form of spirituality you practice. That's why there are practice periods in the workbook, in A Course in Miracles. So no matter what you do today, even if you only recite the day's idea a few times, love created me like itself, you will have done a lot more than you possibly can even imagine to bring the experience of this closer to you. Love created me like itself. And just repeat that if that's all that you find that you're able to do today. Just repeat this idea. Love created me like itself. And sit in there with some of the positive self images, because as you replace your definition of God, you replace your definition of yourself. Love created me loving. I love that one. Yeah. Joy created me joyful. Statements like this, and you can find them in the commentary on lesson 67, because if you're following along, you'll see that every workbook lesson has a few paragraphs of commentary and further explanation of the day's idea. So I would refer you to that. It will tell you actually every day how it recommends that you practice that day's idea. And today, there are a couple of different things that you could certainly do. The quickest and easiest of all of them is to simply repeat this idea. Love created me like itself. And it's important to do this as often as you can today. I mean, this is true of all workbook lessons every day. It's important to do them as often as you remember them. And of course, please give yourself some grace if you forget completely. I've done that so many times, like a lot of times. I haven't even counted how many times I've done a workbook lesson at the start of the day, and then maybe the day called for multiple practice periods. Yeah, I didn't do any. I just got swept away, right? We all get swept away. So if you do, no problem. Really, it's no problem. Just recite today's idea as often as you can. Love created me like itself. We need to hear the truth about ourselves. We certainly deserve to hear the truth about ourselves because we've bought into so many false images of ourselves, so many artificially imposed definitions that don't even approach who we really are deep down once we wipe all of that conditioning away. So let's see who's joining me here on the live stream, guys. This is one of my favorite parts. And I just love to be able to interact with all of you. And again, if you haven't typed in the comments, how has your spiritual practice changed you? I'd love to hear about that. So thank you all for tuning in. And Robert, hello, how are you? Good evening. Evening over in Europe. So this is literally an international group of people. Robert's in Romania, and I'm here in Arizona in the United States. So Robert, thank you for joining us. And Cindy, hello, how are you? So yeah, and Robert writes, this is something that that I can certainly relate to. Though you weren't a religious person, you pictured God as an old man. Yeah, right. White long hair and a beard, kind of like Santa Claus. Okay, yeah. Striking lightning bolts toward people in situations that are labeled as being bad. Yeah, same as me. Yeah, isn't that interesting? You know, from two different parts of the world, totally same sort of image of a separate God, right? With lightning bolts that'll strike you down. And I can't tell you how many times I was told that growing up is God's going to strike you down. It's just a way to manipulate kids into behaving and doing what the parents want them to do, I think. Yeah, I'm just kind of convinced of that. Yeah. And that's how I pictured God as well. And I just thought, how utterly bizarre, because at the same time, the same people were saying God is love. Now, that made sense to me. Yeah, the white man with the beard throwing lightning bolts and just laughing at people's misfortunes. Yeah, that wasn't so resonant. It never has been. So yeah, and why is that still being perpetrated on millions of people worldwide? Well, I don't really know. All right. So Cindy writes, okay, this is really wonderful. This is my wife, Cindy, who's been a guest here on the show. So welcome. I know you're in the next room here. Welcome to the show, and thank you for commenting. So Cindy writes, rather than being defensive about it all, in other words, life and situations, then lets our actions flow rather than try to change everything all the time. Because this stuff, thank you. This is really wonderful for what spiritual practice can do. And what we're on to with this is stepping out of our own way. I say this all the time in teaching, and it's getting out. This is the way I've learned it from various teachers: is getting out of our own way. We're in our own way all the time in our incessant efforts to manipulate situations. I mean, whether we think of ourselves as controlling or not, we all try to manipulate and orchestrate what appears to be the outside world, situations. We get upset when things don't happen the way we want them to happen. If something unexpected happens, it can ruin our day if we allow it to. You know, that sort of thing. I think we can all relate to being in our own way. And spiritual practice, especially A Course in Miracles, really is very good about having specific teachings on that, where we allow the Holy Spirit in this case, so allow God, allow your guides to take over and to tell you, literally, to speak to you in here and tell you what to do in every situation. You cannot lose. And that is a threat to the ego. So that is what spiritual practice is, and most definitely should be about. I love that comment. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you all for, yes, everything that you have written here. Yeah, thank you guys. This is fun. I love it. Now, if you're catching the replay here, a question that I'd love to hear from you is, how has your spiritual practice changed you? Because here in the workbook, we've been talking about very, very fundamental and important concepts like forgiveness. And today's lesson is all about love and God. Love created me like itself. God created me like himself. Same. And we're going to continue to look as we go forward for the next few days at love, at the idea of love. In other words, the idea of God. So this has been A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. Thank you all for tuning in here today. And this is, again, a daily live stream. So I will see all of you right back here on Enlightened World Network tomorrow.